Welcome to Tartarian Tales 57, from the book The World Surveyed, or The Famous Voyages of Travers Vincent LeBlanc, White of Versailles. So this guy was from Versailles, which we looked at in the other video, that place. Whatever the mystery behind that place is, who knows. But this guy is from there, and he traveled around the world, and he's got some great stories, almost Pinto-esque stories. They are excellent. And so this book I came across, found it, searched Tartar, found an amazing chapter that tells a ton of information from this perspective. Very nice, very new, very sweet stuff. So check out the contents of the book. Definitely explore a little further. Again, it goes into Alexandria. I think that's what I was looking at when I came across this. But so I will probably dive into this for a book on Alexandria, because something about Alexandria is egging me on. Maybe I need to try to draw the library or something. I have a few ideas. But either way, this guy had some cool travels, and I want to read them and check them out. So a bunch of people have looked at this book. Very interesting history choices from around, and let's just take a look. I'll show you some cool pictures, some cool art, and we'll see what we can dive into here. It begins on this page right here, 163. So let's get cracking. Amazing insight here in this book. Here we go. Of Tartary, frightful deserts, fierce dogs, a strange history of two lovers, the empire of the Tartars, and their religion. If you're not intrigued yet, then I don't know what to say. But here we go. Of Grand Tartary, which lies on the north of all the provinces I have spoken of, I know nothing but by the relation I received in these parts, and by the memorials of a certain Hollander who was at Pegu. The inhabitants of these countries then told me that beyond the kingdom of Tazate, Mandranella, Transiana, and Kasubi, towards the north are vast solitudes and sandy deserts, which you must travel for many days before you can arrive at a kingdom called Sanabo, which at one end towards the east confines with Cochinchina, subject to the great king of Tabin, or China. To pass these vast lands, there must be made good provision of victuals, water, and beast, for as a merchant of Drogomania told me, a country confining eastward upon these kingdoms, the deserts of Arabia are little in comparison to them. And when I told him the 40 tedious days it cost us betwixt Syria and Medina through the deserts of Arabia, he answered this was nothing in respect, since by the help of guides they might here and there find a well, whereas in the deserts of Asia, in 22 days' journey together, nothing was to be found but sand. And that one day as he traveled along with the convoy, by misfortune one of the jars of water broke, which was a great mischief to them, and a very important loss, being forced for want of it to kill one of their camels, to drink the loathsome water within him and eat his flesh. Whew, these people knew how to travel. He told me then, for more commodious passage, above all things, it was necessary to provide good beasts, and chiefly Persian asses, the best beasts the world affords for carriage, and the most proper for those ways, and are worth as much as a good horse. That after these sands they came to huge mountains, absolutely barren, which in my opinion must needs be minerals, but they try them not, and they are so far distant in the way so troublesome. I observed in my east and western voyages that where the mines of gold, silver, and precious stones, where the mountains were ordinarily barren, having nothing growing about them, as they observe of the calenfor or clove, which suffers no plant near it. The merchant observed likewise that in these mountains, which must be those the ancients called Juwak, dividing High and Low Asia, there are abundance of serpents of prodigious bigness, but are more advantage than damage to them, for being free from venom and of an excellent substance and nourishment, they eat there nothing else, as I remember I saw in the mountains of Syria and Africa. For passing these mountains, and lodging with the Arabians under their tents, 'twas our admiration to see huge serpents play with children, who would give them morsels of bread. But to return to our Tartarian merchant, he told me that having passed this mountainous country, they came to another desert of 20 days over, void of all food, where he was constrained to stray a good day's journey to hunt for water and other commodities, and this too with weapon in hand, because there lives a certain horde or nation of shepherds, or Tartar nomads, who keep huge mastises, fierce dogs, the most fierce and bloody in the world, which indeed have more of the wolf than the dog. They keep these dogs to destroy passengers on the way, to which they train them for diet themselves. He told me about 3 years before this breed of rascals were almost all devoured by their own dogs, after their cruel usage of certain merchants who passed that way. These, to revenge themselves, made an ambush, and having taken them, served them as they had done others. He told me many other curiosities of this country, and amongst others that about 20 years before he passed by the Isle of Valmus, or Ayman, near Canchinchina, and the country of the Memoirs, that the people are haughty, great soldiers, well clothed and very civil, lovers of honor and virtue, and of complexion rather white than black, that the land is full of impenetrable forests, but well stored with venison, and betwixt the mountains good pasturage, that they had there a potent king by the title of emperor, on the day of his birth, wearing on his head 3 crowns in the form of a tiara, for the 3 kingdoms he possessed, that this prince was king of Sinabo, the Majors, and Patines. Amongst other particulars of this country, he related to me a strange history, if it be true, thus, that in a mountainous country vulgarly called Ismanca, very fertile, where there are clowns, very wealthy in cattle, whereof they drive a great trade, as also in skins of diverse beasts. There was a rich shepherd called Ismahan, who amongst other children had a daughter of excellent beauty, who according to the custom of the country kept her father's flocks. This maid of 20 years of age loved a young shepherd, her neighbor and kinsman, but poor, and to whose father the rich shepherd had sent some corn, who, seeing he could not be paid, and being aware of his daughter's affection, he told his debtor that on condition he would send his son to live in some remote parts, he would forgive the debt which the other did. The young man being thus banished by force, the maid was extremely afflicted, and as one day she walked alone in the fields, lamenting the absence of her beloved Liza, so he was called, a fiend in the same shape appeared to her, and demanded for whom she was so much tormented, since she had him assuredly present, and that he loved her more than the world besides. Some say this poor young man, being banished the presence of his dear mistress, fought out a magician, who promised he should see and enjoy her, but bringing into a room to him a spirit in the form of the maid, as the spirits of joy and love made him fly to embrace her, the demon strangled him afterwards, taking the shape, or rather the body, of the dead youth, continued his visits a long time to the maid, whereof her father and brothers, having notice, resolved to surprise him, and in effect breaking up her chamber door, they found a stinking carcass in bed at her, at which both she and the rest were extremely frighted, and the king of the country, having notice of it, sent for the maid to know the truth, which she related as it was. The king sent her to live with an aunt of his, where they say the devil still frequented her, and would visit her publicly in the shape of her friend, wherein she took extreme content, nor could she be dissuaded from his conversation. How I know not, but they say she conceived, and was delivered of 2 children, who grown up became the most valiant and strong in the country, so as since spirits are incapable of generation, as the best divines concludes, we may suppose this was the youth himself, who by the magician's means enjoyed the maid, and was afterwards killed by the devil that abused him. And indeed some authentic authors mention such another history of one Philinium and Machatus and others. The Adventures of Amador, a Painter. Interesting. So I wonder if these stories, these myths, have any basis in reality. And when you have a world that actually does have magic in it, like this ancient world seems to have, I wonder how much magical things are capable of. There seems like there'd be no limit, to be honest. And I'm definitely not one to say. But let us come back to Tartary, where I learnt many other things of one Amador Baliora, a limner, with whom I met coming back from Pago, and saw a good part of his memorials. He had been in the Indies 12 or 13 years, and had drawn the plots of several towns excellently well, insomuch as having escaped shipwreck, and arrived in health at Dayu, when all his company was hanged. For his qualifications the governor saved his life, and he drew him many exquisite pictures, for which he gave him 500 croisades. I would love to see those pictures. I wonder if they can be found anywhere. He had about 50 drafts of the principal towns in the Indies, Persia, and Tartary, and had leave of the viceroy to draw the plots of as many more as he would, his designs being to compile them in a large volume and present it to the King of Spain. But I understood afterwards that returning for Europe, he died upon the Sea of Scarbat, and for that his comrade had disgusted him. He would not give him his memorials and drafts, but by testament bequeathed them to the captain of the ship he was in, Joseph Grogny, a Portuguese, esteemed a Jew, though he dissembled the Christian. The memorials was a great loss, for besides the drafts there was abundance of remarkable singularities he had noted in his travels, whereof the captain made small account, for that he had written them in French, which he understood not, and withal in an imperfect and bad character. But the plots and drafts were excellently done, and besides the delineation of the towns, he had drawn the inhabitants in their garments to the life. I drew some myself, though rudely, which is not hard to compass, with license of the governors, who are well pleased with it, and will give their assistance in it, which Amador had a desire to have, though ill done, but the Sieur de la Corbeille advised me to the contrary, and that I should offer him 500 crowns for his, for which he would not take, as he said, 10,000. In time he prevailed to get my draft of Mandranella in Pegu, by reason he had already one of other Mandranella, which lies towards Persia and Indostan, and in exchange I had of him one of St. Lawrence. He permitted me likewise to see his memorials, whence I took the description of the isle I shall, by God's assistance, describe in the second part of this book. I got moreover certain particulars of his voyage from Bagdat into Persia and Tartary, amongst others. The description and portrait of the town Palimbrot, one of the noblest in all Tartary, subject to the great Cham, or emperor of the Tartars. This town hath been famous from antiquity by the same name of Palimbrot, or Paliboter, situate upon the Ganges, in the territories of the Prasians or Mandrals. I know not if it kept the same name for so many ages, but our modern geographers will have it to be Ava upon the Ganges towards Bengala. Howsoever it is, this Hollander describes it to be a great town in Tartary, definitely going to have to look that up, and was, when he arrived there, almost destitute of inhabitants, by reason according to the custom of war in those parts. They were all gone to assist the great Cham, or emperor, who had a violent war with the king of Largari, a potent prince in High India, who hath also under him the kingdom of Toita, confining northward on Seba and south on Tazete. He describes this town to have seldom any rains, notwithstanding it is fertile, and well peopled with good strength, both of horse and foot. 'Tis one of the best governed in the East, and the people are divided into 3 orders, or estates. Of the first no one can marry, but he must give testimony he hath killed 3 of his prince's enemies. In their assemblies for public affairs, all the councillors, who are in number 9 times 9, or 81, are chosen by lots, and then out of these 9 are made noble, and the king sends to every one a fair bearded horse with a rich present. For you must understand this number of 9 hath been venerable amongst the Tartars, because in the vision they say their emperor Genghis had, he was enjoined they should kneel 9 times as they passed Mount Belgium. Number of 9 amongst the Tartars. I guess it's a big thing. There are 4 fair colleges, well endowed and founded, where all addict themselves to the sciences. Even the women are inclined to studies, and have a particular professor, paid by the principal ladies of the town, to read to them. For their marriage every year they call a public assembly to marry the maids, who are marriageable years, and the rich pay a certain tax towards marriage of the poor, and when that will not suffice, they supply it out of the public treasure. Adultery, as well in man as woman, is punished with death, and being both surprised, they are cut in pieces upon the place. Orphans are brought up at the king's charge, who is obliged to give them maintenance or make them soldiers. That might be a very important thing. Orphans designed to become soldiers, designed to really become anything. Monasteries, artists, you could do anything if you are a power and you have slaves and orphans. Okay, here we go. This Hollander, 178. This Hollander told me further that he was at the famous battle betwixt the great Tartar and the king of Largaray, as bloody as ever was, there being above 200,000 horse and above 2,000 elephants on both sides, and when they had covered more than 2 leagues of ground with the dead, they retreated without advantage on either side. I actually think Mendez Pinto talks about this battle, but either way, he told that he and his company retreated to a quarter in the army, where they had gotten good stores of horses, arms, and apparel, but all was afterwards taken from them by the soldiers. That the Grand Cham Mago attempted to surprise the Sultan of Largaray, but the avenues of his country were so guarded with fortifications he could not. Whereof Amador had the drafts and lines in his memorials, that the Cham, intending to take in the lands of Karagari and Tote, had fetched a compass of above 12 days' march with his army, to gain the deserts of Singlan, which are 5 days' journey over, consisting of wide plains, marshes, and inhabitable places, and where there is nothing to be found but birds as great as swans, for no use but to discover the enemy that comes to invade the country, and at that time they did, for the nature of the fowl is such, that if the enemy come from Tazate side, they fly from the noise and clamor of the army, but if they come from Tartary, whereof the last kingdom confining on Largary is Turaskan, they are not carried by reason of the strait and difficult passages in the forts, the least whereof would cut off an army, how strong soever. So I wonder how high those were. If they cross these deserts to gain the plains of Sibi, these birds that are innumerable, flying from the noise, immediately give notice to the Largarians, Toteans, and Carbandans, confederates, all being well assured, if the Tartars should gain one, the rest would not be secure. So as having intelligence by these swift scouts 7 or 8 days before the enemy can arrive, they have time to put themselves in posture and prevent surprises. Lastly, that all these territories are good and plentiful amongst other things of cattle, good horses, elephants, dromedaries, and camels, that 'tis here the mines of jacinth and sapphire are, whence they get yearly a great quantity, and esteem them more for medicine than ornament. For the sapphire, according to the Indians, hath the virtue to purify and cool in the 4th degree. And in effect, we at our return, having some sold good part in Grand Cairo and Alexandria, and the rest we put off at Palermo in Sicily, where we had for them what we asked, bought only by apothecaries for their medicines. Interesting. But to return to Grand Tartary, I learnt the empire is so large that it reaches from the Sea of Mugu, or China, to the Caspian Sea, innumerably populous, fierce and cruel people of low stature, ill-shaped of body and legs, narrow eyes, very hairy, lustful, subtle, and deceitful. For the greatest part they live in the field as the pastors and nomads, after the manner of the Arabians, under tents, together with their cattle, all in a manner being horsemen, and few to be seen walking on foot. There are many various nations amongst them, the towns of Argi, Asadon, Lassam, and others, the countries of Belgian or Alfei, Mongol, where the famous river Tartar or Totar runs, that gives name to the whole nation. The empire is divided into 4 cantons, that is, Jeka Mongol or Mongol the Great, Mongol the Less or Sumongol, or the aquatic Mongol, Marchet, and Matrik. I wonder if that has to do with water or something. Then the nation of Tangor, Echumar, Talit, Sonnet, Mangi, and Thebet, or Tibet. I knew it. The Great Cham makes annually 13 solemn feasts, whereof 3 principal, that is, on his birthday, his creation installment, that of the first day of the year, which they call properly the White Feast, because on that day they are all generally clothed in white, and all provinces of the empire are obliged to bring presents to the king, in the number of 9, for the reason we have already mentioned. At this feast all the king's princes and subject lords, how remote soever, are bound to be present in person, and present the prince with all sorts of rich things, amongst others with horses, almost all white, and these must be brought before him, and the other presents are brought upon horses, elephants, camels, richly harnessed. When the Cham sits at a table with his princes and lords, after he hath eaten some small matter, one presents him drink on his knees with his face covered, and another tastes it, and then the music sounds. Before they eat, a sheriff or priest, sheriff or priest, performs some ceremonies vested like the rest in a white robe. When he first enters, he salutes and adores the king, and sits down by him at a good distance, then puts on a garment embroidered with diamonds, that lies on a table covered with white, and with a silver censer incenses the king's picture hanging over against him, and he cries aloud, "Let us pray to our great God to preserve our prince for many years." Then all the company up and cry, "God grant it." The priest goes 4 times about the table with this censer. After this they fall to eat, and are served with exquisite and delicate dishes. He celebrates the feast of his nativity in a cloth of gold garment, the princes and officers to the number of 2,000 being all in the like habits, and when they come to eat, they use the same ceremonies as at the other feast. Through all his territories there is prohibition to hunt from March to October, so as they have but the other half year for chase, without license of the prince. I'm willing to believe they knew how to ration animals, they knew how to treat the land perfectly. It was just probably inherited knowledge, how to burn and to eliminate fires that are too bad, and all this stuff. It probably all came naturally. They learned from all the ancients because it makes sense, unlike our world now where everything and nothing makes sense. Alright, here we go. Last page, 180. Throughout all Asia, the Tartars have had great conquests since the year 1200 or I-200, when their first Cham, Chinggis, laid the foundation of the empire, which he took in part from Cham or Prester Jan in Asia. Prester John, so interesting. Since excessively augmented by his successors, subjugating all Asia and the Indies from the Oriental Sea to the Caspian, Armenia, and Polonia. But they have again lost a good proportion, and by their shipwreck many states get liberty. For the greatest part they are idolaters, and some Mahometans. Christians there are likewise, but they are Nestorians, who have depraved Christian religion in many kinds, as amongst others, witnesses a religion of St. Francis sent thither by St. Louis 300 years since, and confirmed by modern relations. They adore their Principe in diverse idols made of cloth and felt. The principal god they adore is called Natiga, to whom they allow wife and children, who coming to growth are gods as well as he. They have abundance of sorcerers and magicians who say they converse familiarly with the devil. The prince hath a breed of white hazers, the milk whereof he confectorates annually on the 8th and 20th of August to Natige, which milk is poured upon the ground. The king hath a number of these magicians ever with him, who boast they can drive rains and storms from over his tent, and they report that a prince of Russia coming to visit this king was bloodily massacred by them, because he did not prostrate on the ground to adore him. He draws his principal guards from the provinces of Tibet and Chamir, a sanguinary, cruel people, addicted to magic, live loathsomely, never washing themselves, and tumble in their own ordure. Some say they feed upon humane flesh, and that such as are condemned to death are allowed them. The magicians are called Bachi. Another sort of philosophers or magicians they have amongst them, called Sansin, by the others esteemed heretics, for what they eat nothing but flour mingled with warm water. They have strange apparitions and adore the devil in the fire. When they speak to their prince, they prostrate 3 times on the ground, laying their hands on their head. In all his commands they receive as from God, saying, Oiga, that is, God commands it. If anyone else be to speak to the king, they perfume him first, and if by accident such a one should let his foot upon the threshold of his tent, he is immediately massacred and carried into another tent, and set a flag upon him. Likewise, when one is sick past recovery, they set the like flag upon him. It is not lawful for any man to enter the king's tent without license. Being dead, they bear his body to another tent, where they prepare his tomb, which is a deep pit, and having put on his richest robes and arms, with the elephants and horses he liked best, they enter all by 9s. I wonder if you could find those pits, what you would end up getting. They marry as the Jews, the brother taking his deceased brother's wife. Interesting. At Pegu, I learnt amongst the Portuguese that the Tartar heretofore gave laws in China, but some ages since the Chinese set themselves at liberty, and having ramparted themselves with the vast wall of 400 or 500 leagues in length amongst the mountains, notwithstanding the Tartar sometimes breaks in upon them, and makes great spoil in China, as in the year I-545, when the great Cham, accompanied with divers kings, and 1.5 million of men, invaded the kingdom, where he made horrible havoc, took inestimable pillage, besieging Peking, itself, whence the king escaped to Nanking, then loaded with booty, retired to his royal town of Lanzame, 15 days' journey from the frontier of China, whereof the next of the Great Wall is Singrachiran, and 3 leagues beyond the first town in Tartary is Pamquinor. Gotta look at all these places. Modern relations say that likewise in the year i618 the Tartar entered this country by force, making horrible slaughters and sacking Peking itself. In brief, they tell wonders almost incredible of the majesty, power, and magnificence of this great sham of Tartary, extent of his country, number of his tributary kings, the reverence and respect given him, the awe of his neighbors, the state of his court, riches of his palace, strength of his innumerable armies, infinity of officers, and magnificent services, that there are continually with him ambassadors from the greatest kings of Asia, as of Persia, Magor, Kalamanam, Siamanon, Pegwan, Siam, Cochinchina, Karaim, Khorasan, and the Muscovite himself. They style him the great Chinaras. They say rather more than less of the great king of China, whom they style the son of the sun, and by his people is adored as a god. But I let it pass, as well for that. I know nothing but by report. As for that, there are ample relations already extant. So that is exactly true. I mean, he only knows, this is his perspective, this is his knowledge. So I'm very curious about the things that they refer to as magic and devils and magicians and stuff, since these kind of Christians all, always use the same kind of words to describe something that's impossible. Like like modern now describing a shaman, it would be very tough because they're just in a completely different world. Everything's totally different, and what some person could see as like a seizure or something is actually a spiritual epiphany of beyond comprehension to that person. So how much was beyond comprehension to everybody observing these Tartars? They know the great sham, they all had power, they all had elegance, they all had charisma, and they always have like a power about them, some thought about them that just makes them be like, wow, they seem different. They almost seem like they're a different species of human in some way, the way that these people refer to them and the differences between the ways they all live. Really astounding stuff. And the wall and them conquering it and taking an army of 1.5 million men at these times. Like, how many? What does that mean? And all these things, I feel like they took so many different names from the past and probably from this Tartar society, erased it. They stole all the names and erased like this Tartar history from us, or just kind of belittled it in the sense that they don't really talk about it. But we get so much from them. We get the stories, the myths, these cultures. How many different aspects of all of this do we get of these customs come from Tartar? How many of us have Tartar DNA in us, perpetuating without us even having a clue about it? And can we tap into that? And is that different than what the European blood and DNA and spirit has in it? What is the answer here? Are the Tartars people from beyond the realm, and we, the other ones, or the other way around, are the evil people from beyond the realm, and the Tartars have been here always in a different form? And they say like that big city was something in antiquity far beyond what it was today, and they refer to Genghis Khan as the first Cham, but really, that's all it is from this guy's perspective, in a matter of erasing and deleting history, which we know is incredibly easy, especially over spans of hundreds of years, if not thousands. So again, more mystery, some facts, it seems like, some great, incredible insight, some read between the lines moments, and a lot of just more questions. I feel like these people's perspectives, the stories that you can get from the people that traveled through these areas at this time, hold a lot. And to take some of the names of the towns and places like the Tartar River and all these different things, examining them, looking for wreckage on them via Google Earth or in person, these are our methods for making something happen and getting to the next levels of realization, as well as in the magical, spiritual realm. Maybe we can still connect to the world the Tartars and Tibetans built. If they have navigated those worlds, maybe they left some trace for us to find, some answers there. I believe that the answers lie in all different realms combined, and we need to materialize them in this one to make it work and make it fit everything that we know. But we'll see. Everybody is putting their part in. Every thought counts. Every bit helps to the puzzle. So let's keep piecing it together. Bless you all.